Thank you. Is it 5G? 4G. Good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Aigars. I'm technical director responsible for rolling out planning and doing a lot of things about the 5G in Latvia. Today's subject, we have a little short time, 20 minutes, so it will be less for a deep dive in technology rather than to practical implementation aspects of 5G, which we experienced here in Latvia and more like from the world around us. We're living in an interesting time. In the more than past 2 decades, we've been having the 4th generation. We are in front of the 5th generation of the mobile networks, and it's difficult already to say that is it mobile networks or generally networks because it integrates all technologies. It's supposed to integrate all technologies, fixed, wireless, any kind of where devices are connected to the network. So, as mentioned, we are on the forefront of 5G. A little bit about the basics. The ones who've been maybe reading the public releases, hearing about 5G, different speeds, yeah? About the basics that the ITU-R, R stands from radio, it's very technical international telecommunication union organization that defines the requirements for 5G. Some of those you most probably know that's maximum speed. It's very kind of practical. Latency, we know what latency is, but then we start to talk about what really 5G is supposed to be. We talk about the density, millions of devices on square kilometer, low maintenance costs, so long battery lives, the less touches, different kind of devices, because all of them, if you talk about the millions and millions, needs to be maintained. Mobility. Mobility is a key for mobile networks. So how fast those devices can move around. Yeah? In 4G, the requirements defined at 200 kilometers per hour. In 5G, we talk about 5 kilometers per hour. The devices can move around. Data throughput, more like effectiveness, how many bits per hertz we can transfer. So it directly relates to the capacity, to the throughput itself, and the capacity in the border of the cell area. So these are the requirements that ITU sets towards the industry. We want to be 5G. We want to have the 5G networks reach these old parameters. But what it really makes for use cases. So we as users, you as users, you look forward, yeah, fine, speed, latency, and so what we have, they already quite enough and quite substantial speed already in 4G networks. So therefore the industry, the partners, associations, there are hundreds of them, came back and say, okay, let's define this kind of triangle. This kind of triangle you most probably will see or have seen already in different papers. It's talk about the aspects, the services can really consume the throughput. These are the capacity for everyone, the cloud services, for instance, using the different kind of applications, 4K, 8K videos in the future, virtual reality gamings, work in the cloud. This all requires throughput. And 5G meant to be to provide the infrastructure to provide this service or to ensure these services. Another aspect is massive machine communication or massive IoT, Internet of Things. Massive means millions and millions of devices. We talk about the same devices at home, in fridge, in bed, and sofa, and everywhere. And all these devices will generate the data. All the devices will connect to the network. All the devices will talk with the network. So the 5G is supposed to ensure that these devices will be connected, respond to devices, transfer the data. And mainly these are the sensors. Yeah? The third aspect, or the kind of part of the 5G is latency and reliability. The low latency, high reliability, that the 5G is meant to be in the future. Yeah? These are really for Industry 4.0 or robotics, logistic, all that requires that there is fast response from the devices, and the response is reliable. There is no one in the middle that had hack on our data. And mission critical. So these three aspects, let's keep in mind for the further slides as well. In order to build up the network, so there are requirements, there's an idea for use cases. So what technology should be really in 5G? 6 main, well, there are more than them, but 6 main building blocks is required in order to enable all this what's been talked before. New spectrum, the current spectrum is taken by 2G, 3G, 4G, different access technologies. The new spectrum has to be available. In the world of mobile communication, there is one single asset which is limited, it's spectrum. No spectrum, no network. There's more spectrum, better network, better quality of services. Already now, if you look at the first building block, there's pretty much done already in Europe, around the globe. The spectrum for 5G is available on the very beginning, 3.5 gigahertz. In the US, we talk about 28 gigahertz. In Asia, 3.5. And China, maybe something different. Effectiveness, we talk about massive MIMO. Massive MIMO, different antenna systems in order to really take in all the capacity. Beamforming, follow up each and every user. Effectiveness of technology, providing really the capacity in 5G. Flexible interface for different access types. There has to be flexibility in. Multi-connectivity, 4G, 5G. 4G, 5G means that currently the mobile is not connected only to 5G, but also to 4G. Yeah? How these technologies work together. And then we come to really, which is, concerns few, is cloud-native network and network slicing. The core network will be completely redesigned comparing to current 4G networks. And connection, connect-less communication, so that the data will be generated and will reach the database or the cloud where it will be accumulated, and there won't be connectivity which is permanent. Practicality, early deployments today, we see US already, North America, Europe, part of Europe is already starting the early launch of 5G networks. APAC, Asia, also China as well, but a little gray area, we don't know what's really happening there, and Australia. So we see the 5G networks coming up. But is it really 5G? Also in Latvia we have 5G. Summer we launched the 5G in Latvia. We have a first experience, first learnings out of 5G networks as well. And in terms of the operators, in terms of the commercial agreements, 49 commercial agreements in key markets already made. More than 100 agreements for the test network. So all this is much faster developing than the 4G networks what we experienced 10 years ago. Practical aspects and principles. And here we talk about frequencies, which most probably a little bit stranger for you. The lower the frequency, the more coverage we have, but the less data rate which we can achieve. The higher the frequencies, the less the coverage, but the more also the data rate which we can achieve. So that the higher the frequencies, more hotspot areas, mid frequencies, which we talk about now, 2.5 to 3.5 it's a bit mixed. It provides the coverage and capacity, and the low is about the coverage. Practical, what means that these frequencies will be used in different aspects. I'm covering the country. So you see the 700 megahertz band, which is low frequency, is more like a wide coverage area. So mid-frequency for urban, the dense urban area. And then the really millimeter wave frequencies, it's really the hotspots, really the hotspots. Current use cases, we'll touch later on the current development with 5G is that enhanced mobile broadband. What we can really do with 5G is enhance mobile broadband and fix the wireless access. That's the current standpoint today. We cannot talk about the very low latency, up to 1 millisecond. We talk about lower than 4G, but the technology is not yet still there. We cannot talk about the high capacity yet. The massive MIMO is there, is still developing stage. So all it is still coming and will be delivered in the years to come. However, first learning shows on the frequency 3.5, by having the 100 megahertz spectrum, we can reach 1.4 gigabit per second in the peak rate. And the downlink. And uplink is still going via 4G. That's how currently 5G is made. Downlink over 5G, uplink via 4G. Therefore, the rates are really kind of big difference between them. However, when we make a drive test through the city, the average speed which we can reach is 500 megabits per second. That's the average speed. So the requirements, the technical requirements is the one part. This is ideal situation. But the real life shows that there is certain signal propagation issues that needs to be taken account, that the speeds are much lower than practically in or in technical terms. However, 5G is important for boosting the data. What we see from South Korea, data currently it's available, that the usage has increased and the data consumption has increased. Now, average, it's 3 to 5 times. But if you take one of the samples from SK Telecom, it's about 65%. So that's really the boosting the data. Even so, the use case is still the enhanced mobile broadband. This is mobile phone or the router. Another learning, the higher frequencies, you will need to have more sites, more base stations. It really shows that the importance of how the network is planned in order to really provide whether it's enterprise services or fixed wireless access with a high capacity, these base stations will be closer located to each other. We are talking about the really 26 gigahertz band frequencies. The same on a drive test, 150 meters around the corner and we lose a signal. The signal is really weak and the mobile goes down to 4G network. Yeah? So these are the learnings, how to building the network so that different frequencies will be used, but different frequencies will provide a different data rates, different latencies as well, if you want to say. Summary, high band, mid band, low band, all frequencies will be used for 5G. Certainly, this will provide a different data rates, and that needs to be taken account. Whom we plan, what we plan, and whom we provide the services. Whether it's enterprise, of course, we go on higher end. Whether it's IoT, we go on very low end band. Today's situation, we are on release 15, mainly enhanced mobile broadband and non-standalone options. That's related together with 4G network. So it's a dual connectivity network today. Downlink 5G, uplink 4G, management from 4G network. Mid next year, specs for release 16, that includes the critical machine communication will be ready. Then we can start to think about the new services related to IoT, specific security networks. And release 17 comes a bit longer term in year 22, will be about the massive IoT that really can take into account the millions of IoT devices. That's the current schedule. It's moving fast. A lot of early developers start already deploy the network. Next year, we still can talk about early networks, trials, tests. In a year, 3 years from now, 4 years from now, we can talk really about the 5G networks, what meant to be in the specifications. Yeah, it's about, once again, 3 building blocks. Availability today, mobile broadband, in future, all the services related to ultra-low latency, massive type of communication, IoT, and so on. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And now it's time for questions. I have a few questions here posted on our online survey. The first one that I would like to ask to you is, what about the remote locations in the rural areas in Latvia? Will 5G technology be able to provide the promised bandwidth and speeds also there?
Good question. What's the promised bandwidth? Yeah, low frequency, which we talk about 700 and 800 megahertz, supposed to provide the service, the decent service in remote locations. Of course, it provides the services within the buildings as well, due to nature of radio waves in the network and penetration. It depends on, of course, operator strategy, but generally, frequency, the lower the frequency, the more coverage it can provide. But the bandwidth is very much limited. The data rates won't be very high. It's but decent just to, to search the internet.
Some of the attendees here are asking, is it a myth or reality about the huge hype about the 5G, I don't know, dangers or anything related to this?
I can only relate to World Health Organization. That's the data we take into account, the local regulations. We are below the limits that is really risky for humans. I mean, we are below the limits. Even the current measurement shows that the exposure of radio frequency is very much limited. Yeah, so we are within the limits, or even below the limits of what defines the local regulations.
All right, thank you. I would like to take some questions directly from the audience as well. Is there anyone who would like to ask the question? There you go. Here.
Do you expect any delays because of the Huawei and all the bans and things like that coming on?
Delays of, can you more explore that?
The Huawei with the situation with the United States and the embargoes and all that, do you expect it to impact deployment of 5G?
I'm not much aware that it will delay implementation. Anyway, implementation of different aspects of 5G is still on a very early stage. Some vendors are much faster, some vendors are much slower as well. But generally, from the equipment, from the networks which are available now, we can talk about half a year. I mean, delay one vendor from another vendor. Yeah. So some vendor has more developed some technology, some access, some frequencies than another one. Yeah. So, but that gap is really short. I mean, it's going to be next year. It's vanish.
One more final question, if we have. The gentleman down here was the first one that I noticed, at least.
In the light of this massive multi-connectivity which is coming in future years, is it finally time for IPv6?
it's certainly not the time. If someone has not implemented IP version 6, the company is delayed in the market in providing the services. IP version 6 is a must for 5G. Definitely take into account how many devices will be connected to the network. So all that will be based on IP version 6. Of course, IP version 4 will live along with IP version 6, but that's the must.
Right, thank you. Let's give an applause to speaker. It was a good idea. Wait a minute.
Oh, thank you.
Also, a chocolate.